Welcome, everyone. It's been 6 months. It's been 6 months since I started HRT, and it's very exciting. Uh, Interestingly, today I'm not really going to talk about changes from hormone replacement therapy itself because I've discussed those changes in past videos, and it's all basically the same, right? It's like hair getting softer, skin getting softer, chest increasing in size, all that sort of thing. There hasn't been anything new in that respect. What I do want to talk about today, though, is something that was very difficult. And this really started in December, which is, I think, when you're transitioning, or at least when I started my transition, at the very beginning, everything is incredible, right? Everything is exciting. Like, just the idea of this being possible in any way is just a relief I cannot properly describe if you haven't experienced it. But there's a funny thing that I think happens, and I don't even think this is unique to transitioning at all, but I do think it's it's definitely something that's important to be aware of, which is, at the beginning, the idea of doing any of this, the idea that any of it is even possible, it's indescribable. However, like anything, as you begin to do these things more often, they feel more normal, right? The first time I let myself put on a skirt, it was a revelation. The first couple of times I put on makeup and saw something closer to myself was incredible. And of course, over time, that just becomes normal. And of course, part of the issue with this, and I think this is something that is likely more true for people who are transitioning a bit later, is you start to focus more, or again, I'm speaking about myself here, that you start to focus less on where you're coming from than where you're trying to go to. And right, like the idea of just becoming less masculine, of getting away from those aspects of yourself that you really hate or that make you very uncomfortable, that's nice, right? But then when you start looking at your transition goals, where you're trying to reach, that's much further away. And because all of these things, right, the changes from hormones are slow. They take time. You have to wait a lot, right? Things like laser hair removal, like obviously I've made progress, but it's not there yet, right? All of these things are things that just, you need to be patient. And the more you're looking at the destination rather than where the journey began, the more daunting it can sometimes be. And sometimes it does feel impossible. And it's a very difficult thing to accept. Right? Because some days you feel like you're not making any forward progress, right? Like I've been working on voice training, I've been working on my voice, but this is not there yet either. And same for everything else, right? Like, and it is, I think, for me, this really started around month 5, and has sort of progressed, pushing through the holidays. Like it's gotten easier, but there was definitely a hump there to sort of get over, and to try and be realistic. I think like one issue too is if you are transitioning later, as I am, right? Like you can see there are a lot of younger transgender people who are transitioning much earlier in life, and it is not healthy to, as a 45-year-old trans woman, to compare yourself to a 22-year-old. It's just not reasonable to compare yourself that way in any situation, right? Um, but at the same time, there is a feeling of that's a something you got sort of cheated out of, and there's a point where like you have to let go of that. Um, and yeah, like it's a difficult thing to do. And refocusing on what is possible and what is reasonable, like, is important. And again, like, and I don't say any of this because I have absolutely zero regret. Um, but it doesn't mean that it's always easy. In fact, none of it is easy at all. But at the same time, it's this was sort of blindsiding, right? Because everything at the beginning is really good, seeing a lot of positive progress, and then like there's this point where it just kind of hit me in the side of the head, uh, and kind of forced me to like rethink things and re-examine, what I've been trying to do. So yeah, I mean that's really the big thing I wanted to talk about this time. Um, Still, I'm working on getting more clothes. Obviously, like I'm dressed a bit more masculine today, because I want to, like, ultimately I want to have a good range of clothing. Like I don't want to be dressed like hyper feminine all the time. I'm from Maine. I like camping. I love the outdoors. I like to go rock climbing, right? So like I'm still a very I still want to be able to wear clothes and still feel like I can present myself as a woman and be comfortable in those kinds of activities as well. So I'm trying, yeah, trying something a little bit more, less obviously directly feminine. And so that's, yeah, clothing is still difficult right here in Southeast Asia in general. It is a bit of a challenge to find clothing in my size. I'm not big, but I am rather tall. Well, rather tall for a woman, definitely tall for a Vietnamese woman. So, but yeah, so that's really what I have for this month. I am thinking about maybe summarizing sort of everything, consolidating all the stuff from the longer videos and actually writing it down to get into a more consolidated form. And I am still working on the video about my experience with dysphoria, with a friend of mine here. That's scripted. The script is finished. We've done a bit of like pre-shoot planning. It won't be terribly professional, but it will be more professional than these are. So, at any rate, Happy New Year, and as of yesterday, Happy Lunar New Year to everybody. And I know it's difficult out there. I am very detached from a lot of what's happening simply because of where I am. Um, but I do wish everybody to stay safe, and I wish everybody a very happy New Year. Yeah, and thank you once again for joining me.